I left my family business after they refused to pay me. Now they're begging for help, but what I did next shocked them. I'm 32, and I'm finally at peace with not feeling guilty about walking away from my family's endless string of bad decisions. But to explain how I got here, let me take you back a bit. My grandfather started a small chain of grocery stores in the 70s. It was his pride and joy, and for a while, the business did well. When he passed, my dad and uncle took over, and things slowly started going downhill. They'd argue about money, wasted on unnecessary renovations, and hire random people they liked without checking if they were actually qualified. But none of that mattered because, to them, the business was the family legacy, and I was supposed to be proud of being part of it. From the time I was 13, I was roped into working there. Summers, weekends, even during holidays. We all pitch in, they'd say, as if my cousin wasn't off screwing around with his friends while I was stocking shelves for hours. I wasn't paid either because family doesn't charge family. That was their favorite line anytime I brought it up. If I ever pushed back, my mom would hit me with, "Do you think we didn't make sacrifices for you?" So I stopped arguing and just did the work. Fast forward to my 20s, I graduated college and landed a decent job in logistics. It paid well, gave me a sense of independence, and for the first time, I felt like I was out of their shadow. But my dad wasn't having it. At every family gathering, he'd find a way to corner me. "You're wasting your potential," he'd say, like I was letting the family down by not working for them. "We need someone with your skill set. You could really make a difference." At first, I brushed it off, but the pressure kept building. Every time I visited, it was the same story. "Why don't you care about your family? Do you think we're going to just let everything your grandfather built fall apart?" They'd even drag my mom into it. She'd look at me with those big, disappointed eyes and say, "You'll regret not stepping up when it's too late." Eventually, I caved. My dad made it sound like I'd be coming in to save the day. "We need fresh ideas," he said. "You'll have control of the marketing department. Full creative freedom. It's exactly what you're good at." He conveniently left out that I'd barely be getting paid, but by that point, the guilt had done its job. I figured, what's the harm in helping out for a while? The harm was obvious the second I stepped into the office. The marketing department was a joke, a desk crammed into a corner and a pile of dusty flyers. The website was from 2005, and they didn't even have a social media presence. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work anyway, only to hit wall after wall. Every idea I had was shot down. "Social media is just a fad," my dad said. "We don't need it. Updating the website. Too expensive. New promotions? We've always done fine without them." It wasn't just frustrating, it was insulting. Meanwhile, my uncle's son, my cousin, was hired around the same time as a consultant. That was code for sitting around all day drinking coffee and scrolling on his phone. He didn't even try to hide it. I'd be busting my ass, and he'd be in the break room laughing at YouTube videos. And guess what? He was making double what I was. When I brought it up, my dad didn't even pretend to care. "He's not family, so we have to pay him more to keep him around. You, on the other hand, should be doing this out of loyalty." That was the first big blow. The second came when my uncle stole one of my ideas. I'd worked for weeks setting up a partnership with a local farm-to-table supplier, something I knew would bring in new customers. Right before the deal went through, my uncle swooped in, took credit for it, and got himself a bonus. When I confronted him, he laughed. "We're all in this together," he said, like that somehow made it okay. My dad backed him up, of course. "Stop being petty. It's not about who gets credit." I couldn't take it anymore. After a year of being treated like a doormat, I quit. My dad called me selfish. My mom cried and said I was letting the family down. My uncle told me I'd never find a job as fulfilling as working for the family. But I walked away anyway. I found a new job at a competitor, and for the first time in years, I felt valued. I made good money, I had control over my work, and I didn't have to deal with my dad breathing down my neck. But of course, my family wasn't going to let me go that easily. Every few weeks, my dad would call, asking for just a little advice. At first, I'd give it, mostly out of habit, but it quickly became clear he had no intention of paying me for my time. One night, After an hour-long call about suppliers, I told him, if you want me to keep helping, I'm going to need compensation. He laughed. You're really going to charge your own father? That's when I started saying no. No more free advice. No more favors. If they wanted my help, they could pay for it like anyone else. For a while, I thought that was the end of it. Then the pandemic hit, and everything went to hell. The business was already struggling, but the lockdowns, supply chain issues, and rising costs pushed them to the brink. Stores were closing, debts were piling up, and they were desperate. One night, my dad called. His voice was shaky, something I'd never heard before. We're in trouble, he said. We need your help. I could have said no. Honestly, I should have, but I also knew that if I was going to step in, it'd be on my terms. I spent the next week putting together a proposal. 1. I'd get an ownership stake in the business. 2. I'd have full control over operations, without interference from my dad or uncle. 3. I'd be paid a proper salary, equal to the value I was bringing in. When I presented it, my dad looked like I'd slapped him across the face. This is extortion, he said. My uncle called it ridiculous. My mom said I was tearing the family apart. I didn't budge. You brought me into this, I said. If you want my help, this is the cost. Take it or leave it. Then I left the room. It took them 3 days to come around. I'm guessing the mounting bills and empty stores did most of the convincing. They signed the agreement, though not without plenty of grumbling. My uncle tried to sneak in some edits to limit my authority, but I caught them and made him fix it. By the end, I was officially in charge, and the first thing I did was lay down the law. The business was bleeding money, and I wasn't about to let anyone stand in my way. My uncle lost his CFO title, which he'd clung to for years despite not having the first clue how to manage finances. My cousin, the so-called consultant, was fired on day one. He showed up late to a meeting that morning, coffee in hand, and acted like nothing had changed. When I told him he was done, he had the audacity to say, "You can't do this. My dad will back me up." I just handed him his termination letter and told him to clear out his desk. From there, I got to work. The stores were outdated and poorly managed, so I streamlined everything. I cut unnecessary expenses, renegotiated supplier contracts, and revamped the branding. I launched a social media campaign that tripled our online traffic in a month. My dad hated every second of it. "We've been doing this for decades," he'd say. "Why fix what isn't broken?" I'd reply, "It is broken. That's why you're drowning in debt." He didn't like that, but he couldn't argue with the results. Meanwhile, the entitlement didn't stop. My uncle came to me one day with a suggestion. He wanted me to train his son. Yes, the same cousin I'd fired, so he could eventually take over my role. I laughed out loud and said, "Why?" "So he can sit on his ass and let someone else do the work." My uncle wasn't amused. "You're being disrespectful," he said. "He's family." I shut him down right there. If he wants to work here, he can start from the bottom like I did. Otherwise, I'm not wasting my time. Then there was the time my mom tried to guilt me into donating part of my salary back to the business. "It would be a nice gesture," she said, as if I hadn't already sacrificed enough. "Grandpa would have wanted you to give back to the family." I told her. Grandpa also believed in paying people what they're worth. I'm not a charity. The worst was a board meeting where my uncle tried to pin the company's past failures on me. He said my reckless ideas, like the farm-to-table partnership he stole, were what nearly tanked the business. I let him rant, then calmly pulled out a stack of reports. I went over every initiative I'd introduced and showed how each one had increased revenue and cut costs. By the time I was done, the board was silent. My uncle didn't say a word for the rest of the meeting. Despite all the nonsense, I turned the business around. Within a year, we were back in the black, and the stores were doing better than they had in decades. My dad and uncle still found ways to complain, of course. My dad said I was too focused on numbers and not enough on tradition. My uncle accused me of being power hungry. I ignored them both. I wasn't there to make them happy. I was there to fix what they'd broken. After about 18 months, I decided I'd had enough. The business was stable, and I'd proven my point. I announced my resignation during a family dinner, and the reaction was priceless. My dad looked like I just told him I was moving to Mars. You can't leave, he said. We need you. My uncle said, after everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? My mom, of course, started crying. The family needs you, she said. You can't just abandon us. But I wasn't budging. I told them, I came here to save the business, and I've done that. Now it's up to you to keep it going. My dad tried to convince me to stay by offering to double my salary. I turned him down. Money wasn't the issue. I just couldn't keep putting myself through their nonsense. Before I left, I sold my ownership stake back to the company at a significant profit. I also gave them a detailed roadmap for the next 5 years, outlining everything they needed to do to keep the business afloat. Whether they followed it or not was their problem. I still see them at family events, but the relationship's different now. They know I'm not their safety net anymore, and I've stopped feeling guilty about that. My dad still tries to guilt me every now and then, saying, your grandfather would have wanted you to stay. I just smile and say, Grandpa also would have wanted you to pay me fairly. Helping them was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it taught me a lot. I learned how to stand my ground, even when it meant disappointing the people I cared about. I also learned that loyalty doesn't mean sacrificing your own well-being. Sometimes the best way to support your family is to let them figure things out on their own. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.